we started out doing the whole passenger area floor pan. Got that in, looks great, feels like you got half the car done nearly. Did the front of the wheel wells where the seat belts and all that stuff were. And now, with that trunk floor back there from AMD, it'd be a great time to get that ready to go in, but we can't do it yet because we have some issues back here, some deterioration, some rot that need to be addressed. And the worst of it's probably right here. And any of the areas that you see painted red, those are areas that need to be cut out and replaced. So what we're going to do, we're going to make some patterns of some stuff, probably patterns of everything that we can possibly, which is most of it. And then we'll go through and cut this out piece by piece and put those pieces in, weld them in, and we should be good. We want to make a few measurements and record that just in case we get lost, so to speak, and I'll show you that. And we'll get it done, all right? Okay, looking back at the same angle, just a little closer, we're gonna start on this right here first. All right, just kind of get a little span of where we're at. Just attacking the first thing that's really catching my eye from where I usually stand here in the shop. This is part of the spring shackle. Your leaf spring shackle assembly mounts right here on these bolt holes and then swings forward. This is basically just a boxed in area to help keep the strength in. And over time, these will rot out, and I'm sure some of you have seen them in junkyard and stuff. The springs will be sticking through the floor. Well, that's where all this stuff continued to rot, and it basically just gave way. So, what I did here, I have a piece that's slightly oversized paper, and we're gonna put it in here, and we're gonna not rebuild the entire box. We're gonna build a portion of it, and that's really just this area here with a little lip, this lip, all the way to the edge where they're spot welded to this piece, and then it wraps under where they bent it, but we're just gonna cut it right here at this bend and put the new piece in. So I want to use our bottom corner here because this is the very edge of the piece that we're going to be needing. So I'm going to square it up with the existing edge, and we'll do the same thing here. And once I get it, if you want to tape it down, you can, and then proceed to pinch it all the way up into the corners here, like so. And you might have to make a relief cut on your paper so it'll all fit in there good. And if you look there at the top, you can see that we have some excess, and that's good. We'll mark that and then cut it away. And up here, there's a little bit that when I was removing the trunk floor, I cut too much right here. So I'm gonna make sure that's up in there. I'm gonna follow this line here. And we could use a straight edge on that if we don't complete it. And come up to here, right there like that. And we know it comes out to about there. This has a little bit of a shape to it. It may not really be relevant, but we'll try to duplicate it anyways. Now back in here, there is a lip where it bends out and it mounts to this rear cross rail. It goes all the way across the back of the car. It's kind of what's behind your bumper. So I'm just going to take my fingernail and kind of drive it in there to where we recreate that shape of it. And it's right here. So this is access basically from here down. I'm gonna lift that up. I'm gonna come up right there. Now what I can do is pull this out and kind of reset with it a little bit. So I can cut away what I know, because back in this corner it might get a little dicey. Not too bad though. I'm just gonna cut away what I know that we do not need. I'm gonna put a relief cut right through here. And then we can start chipping away at what's left. So we're gonna reposition this back on here. It's flush along this bottom where it starts to cut in, and it's flush right here where we want to stop it. Up here it looks really good at the top now that it's been trimmed. And the same thing here. So we have a lip here and a lip here. And what I need to do, we have some overlap up here. So I'm just gonna mark the top of this piece, the lip, which is right there, and just go all the way back. Now I did make a mistake. See where I did my relief cut? I actually need that to follow all the way through. So I just take a piece of tape and correct that. And it's okay to mess stuff like that up because it's just a template. Okay, so I've pretty much just strapped it back around. And when you put that back up there, line it back up where it needs to be. I'm going to do a dotted line right here so it helps distinguish for the camera where that bend is, right there. Our relief cut will now come in right here because that's the top of that lip. Okay, and I will go up a little bit. And ultimately I can actually come across here because that's the top lip. Now this lip here extends all the way over to here. So it really, if you flatten this piece underneath out, it makes the piece much more simple. So we can include that by lining this back up here. And then when you stretch this out, it makes up that difference. Okay. So, from here, all the way to there it is. That's what this is here. We need to trace this very carefully over a piece of like 16 gauge steel. And once we cut it out, we can apply the bends to it just like this with the vise. And then we can proceed to cut this out. There's some spot welds here. There's a few here. And then we'll have to do a straight cut with the cutting wheel through here to separate it from the bottom, which is actually still good. And then we can splice it all in, square it up. It should mount it in there just right. Alright, so you might hear the rain outside, so I'm going to be speaking up. But I went ahead and made all the templates that I need to rebuild all of this. You saw us do this one. It will accompany both sides. It will take care of that, okay? So we'll lay that right there. I made this one, and forgive all the stitching. I had to do it just so that I could get everything just right. So a lot of pieces are overlapped. But this is your frame rail channel, okay? So couple of bends in it, and then your lips for the flanges on the top. There's your boxed section that can cover this and cover this. Now with this particular car and the rot that is in it, that's the only two templates that I technically need because everything else is good. This back cross rail here is good. The piece here that the actual spring shackle mounts to on both sides is good. It really just leaves this outer piece, and then the frame rail, okay? Now the underside here, that's kind of a little more sculpted, more intricate, is in good shape. Can't really explain that because that's where the dirt would have set. The dirt would kick up here, there's a hole right here. It would set on top of this little lip, and it could rot it out. In some cases it does. So you'll have to attack that, just basically make a template of that where everything rolls in, all the lips and stuff. But I think the reason that these side pieces were so bad about rotting out as well as the inside of the frame rail is when they painted the car, they painted after it had been unitized. And the paint wouldn't exactly go up through here very well, so you had bare metal. Now they did put them in a primer bath, but that over time was not great. I mean, it had like a 5-year span on it. That was kind of what it was intended to do. 50 years, not so much. So the paint probably wouldn't get in there, so it's really pitted over here. And it's really pitted here. It's worse on that side. And you can see where it obviously just ate through here. And then we have these little brackets like where your exhaust hang on to. These get moisture and salt and dirt behind them and then they swell up, and that's ultimately what killed the frame rail sheet metal in that. The way that this needs to be cut out is a little more intricate, so we'll go ahead and chop this piece out and get it out of the way. And then we'll have to make some measurements because this piece anchors on the side, right? There's a lip right here. So we're gonna make some measurements from certain points here. We can make some tape lines and some scribes and then come down to here and then mark it where this needs to position, because you don't want to remount this too far forward, too far back. You might cause some kind of bias in your tracking or your suspension or even the way it sits. So you want that to fall exactly where it is now, especially in relation to that one over there. So we'll probably have to do a whole channel, basically our full piece, from about, I would guess, let me see. So the hole is right there. So about there, all the way back to here. So about a foot long section. And then what I want to do, I want to recreate the jig holes. Like there's two holes under here. And here's where our rot hole is. You can see where I'm putting my finger behind it. But you have some mounting holes here. The jig holes are the large ones. And then you have one on the inside here. You've got the one here for the exhaust. And then you have some like kind of square holes, and that might be more exhaust type stuff. I can't actually remember what some of these symmetrical holes are for one on this side and that side. But I'd like to recreate that, put those back in so it looks the way it's supposed to, the way it was meant to. It's a proper restoration.
And now, a classic Indiana car commercial.
The drums say go west and save.
The drums say go west and save at Don Sisk Pontiac, 3930 Georgetown Road.
The price says it all.
Don Sisk Pontiac, just west of Lafayette Square.
What I have here is a piece of like one of those grab bars in a bathtub. I happen to laying around, and you know, solid, that type of thing. And this is likely going to have to come off, fix the area behind it, because obviously this will come off just like the other side, and the area that's mounted to will have to be undone. So I put a piece of tape here because when I put the blunt end of this right up against the face of that, the tape rides up directly against it. And then plus I also took my cutting wheel and put a very small notch right here that I will have to weld back later. But in case we lose our tape, at least the notch will be there to just signify where it all goes so we don't lose our place, okay? We'll also double check it by taking measurements off the other side. Coming over here, taking some measurements here, putting a piece of tape here, and then writing it down. So just do that. Make sure you make some points of reference to where the flat part of this comes up to a certain point. You can either make scribes, do it a few places, that way when they all come together, all the numbers will match where they need to be, and you know exactly where that needs to go. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to do a couple more readouts on it, and then we will start cutting this away. Okay, so in order to keep as much of this intact as possible, this outer piece that ultimately needs to come off like the other side, I'm going to leave it on right now so it provides a little bit of a cross structure for this. But we need to cut away the actual frame rail in the meantime and try to get it in place, reverse this process, and then take that out. So what's going on here is that is some things you don't want to cut, you'll have to trim away when you get to them. Kind of like the spot weld, since we lost our spot weld drill, we're going to have to work in the opposite direction to remove those welds and remove without taking out the piece. So the piece that goes underneath here, it actually has a flange that wraps over under here. It also has a flange here for your bumper, like an L shape. We don't want to cut that way. We'll have to trim it out when we get it all removed, okay? So we want to leave the boxed in section here intact and this little boxed in L-shaped angle in here, and then basically cut everything else away. I came back here and took a square and scribed it right here underneath and all the way up. So it should be a very square cut. And we're going to take our cutting wheel and chop that away first. So here's this piece. We need to remove this by basically just grinding it off the back of this, saving it, and then we'll want to duplicate these holes. So we'll try to keep this intact as much as possible, make the measurements to put these holes back in the right place. You can also see how I preserved this flange off the box and the flange inside of here, as well as the one I spoke about earlier right here. So we'll have to gnaw the rest of this out because see, there's rust damage up here, and we'll have to get the rest of this piece out. So a little tricky, but it can be done. Just take your time and we can preserve as much as this we can. Just cut pieces away that are basically in your way. And think about the actual piece, that it's all the one piece that you're aiming at. So this here will have to go with the square and the circle. Cut it up alongside the flange on the back side if possible. And then we can cut it up here. That way all you have to do is shave the spot welds, plug welds off of this flange right here. Just think three-dimensional when you're doing any of this stuff, and you should be able to do it. If you make any mistakes, obviously, you just go back and weld it back together and make it as strong, if not stronger, than it was before. That is a pilot hole. You can take a step bit. That's why you can't say it's a poor man's version doing this, because this is like a $50 bit. But it'll probably get you through. Put it in there. Go through like that. Here's where it was. Come down with it. Now, you should be able to, it's not hurting the piece, it's so thick. You can just either work it off by weakening it, or if you can get it out far enough, you can cut it. And now I'm talking about cutting the actual frame rail section, but this will probably suffice right here to clear it for now, like that. And then you take the back side, see all this rust right here, you can go through and knock these out with the grinder, with the spot welds, clear this piece off, clean it up. And then it's just going to go right back on the side of the frame rail when you run it in there. And what this does, it opens up this big piece of corrosion. We can remove that just like we would this. And then we're going to have basically a clean area. It's going to be ready to start going the other direction, rebuilding it. Alright, so I took it off the T-stand just so it doesn't kind of distract you from what we're looking at. But this is ready to start building back. We need to clean some of this up as far as just the rust that's on. I've done a little bit of it. But this is structurally where we want to be to go forward. We've preserved this section here, the flange from the boxed in area here, and here as well. And then really we just need to clean up our other little piece and we'll put it back on. But I'll probably just put it back on after we build the new piece of frame rail to bridge over to here. Now remember, we have our measurements that are all in play. I put a 20-inch here, a 13-inch here. Into this notch is where that little piece of clear, like bathtub rail, should fit from there up to there. So before we start attaching anything, or this is even before we build the frame rail, just keep that in mind so you don't get ahead of yourself and forget. So I'm gonna go ahead and prop this back up on here. And you kind of see the mess that we have down there from all the grinding and cutting. But really relieved to be this far into it. We'll get some, I actually need to go get a larger sheet of steel so I can build one full piece here. And when we get that all anchored in, then this will come off and we'll put the new one on there after we make it. Use our weld through primer before we weld anything back. But the next step is to get this frame rail built to length and to shape. So we're making pieces of frame rail. We're using some 16 gauge here and making the U-channel unibody frame rail that is featured on most of the Mopars. It's not a boxed in completely frame unless you count when it's actually all welded together with the trunk floor on it and so on and so forth. But right here we're starting out by working on the smaller flanges, which actually are the ones that weld to the floor. So start out with the main flange first, and here I'm screwing everything down to get it ready to use the workbench as the edge of it as our next bend point. That'll be like the bottom of the frame rail. And we're using stuff like our hands and hammers and vices because we don't have a brake. Now if you have a brake, then you are miles ahead of anything we're doing here right now. But most of us don't have a brake unless we're like professional body guys. And if you're a professional body guy, you're probably not watching me right now, so you kind of get the gist of that. So we're taking this thing loose, and you've got two bends on this one side, and then we're going to flip this whole thing over and build the small flange again, and basically just do a repeat of what we just did, but it's all in the same piece. So we're using our vise. I've always used it this way, just gradually moving it down, but people have suggested in the past you could take two pieces of angle and mount them inside this vise, and then you'll have the whole length of that piece that we're building right there, and you can bend it all at once. I'm just kind of used to doing it this way. It does make it a little awkward on the transition part from the 90 degree to the flat, and then but if you go from the 90 degree over to a completely flat part and bend it to match, then that transition will kind of soften out fairly well. But it's just what you're used to. The hammers come in easy. You kind of ding it up a little bit, but you can just dolly a lot of that roughness out of it. Isn't a big deal. I'm transferring a mark here from one side to the other because I marked it all on the same side, but you're obviously going to be going different ways. So sometimes you just have to transfer the mark to the side that you will see, in this case where it's on the workbench. And like I said, we're just doing a mirror image of what we did on the other side of that. When I cut the old piece of frame out, I used it kind of as the template of where to draw my measurements exactly. And if you know where the short bend and the long bend is in it, then you can get really, really close, if not precisely. And this was no different. It came out really good. Just depends on where you measure on the piece. It takes a little bit of experience on that. Vise comes in handy to squeeze it all together if you can't do it with, just your spindly little arms like I got, but really helps to just parallel the sides up. And we're getting really close to having one nice piece of section here. And it's amazing how a 16 gauge piece of sheet metal. You know, this is pretty thick, but when you're thinking frame rail, of how rigid it becomes when you bend it into the shape, it just feels very solid. And that's the whole purpose of unibody. It just makes everything lighter because you're using lighter materials, but it's just the way it's constructed, which makes a much more rigid piece than it's necessarily a big heavy piece of frame steel, you know. Hopefully you can tell what was going on with all that. Building this frame rail, and it is a little bit crude, but you know, it's not bad. You might think that the more you go pounding on it, the worse it's going to look, but if you do it right, I believe that you can actually, it's like hammer and dolly, kind of get things smoothed out. Remember, a lot of this is actually going to be hidden by a spring shackle like that. I went ahead and conformed the shape to the way it was originally. It's a little bit wider here at the cross rail. This is cross rail, in case you're not sure. This is kind of arrows out a little wide there on both sides. There's a little tab here, and it probably should be one here, but I just cut it all through. And if you look at it over here on this side, it's basically, I just duplicated that effect over there. So at least when you're looking underneath the car, you look up there and you will see these pieces. It'll look factory. It's pretty much ready to go in. Now what I want to do is duplicate some of the holes that were in it, or on it, whatever you want to say. That piece needs to come out, so I'm going to trim that piece out next. And I'm going to measure around, use this as a guide. This was right here, okay? So I want to duplicate this hole, that one, and that one. This one goes completely straight through, so it should be in alignment. Oh, they are drilled down here now. And like I said, I'm going to let the other ones hang until I can find the right size hole cutter, whatever it needs to be. And I have weld-through primer sprayed on the inside of this because this is where that brace needs to go in there. And it's cleaned up, got it off the old piece of frame rail. It's going to sit inside of there. And I got spot weld holes, plug weld holes, whatever, made for it. It'll go in there. So that'll weld back in there tomorrow in our new piece. Alright, so here's our piece with holes. The large hole that goes all the way through. We got the little square hole. I'm not going to bother putting it on this side because it's going to be right up against this. It would not show. It would be pretty much impossible to see when the car is all together anyway. So I'm just not going to fool with that one. That one will show and might actually serve a purpose on this side. From what I gather, I almost think that when you look at the frame rails on these A-bodies, I think they are interchangeable side to side because the holes are the same through here. They on the factory ones are the same here and here. And when you look down, other than this being welded on, there's a e-brake bracket that is welded on there on the inside of both sides. But I'm thinking, and it might not be a big mystery, but I think they're in their raw form are interchangeable side to side because they don't kick any one direction, they're just straight. So just now realizing that, if that's an old bit of info. And on the actual car itself, the shackle box, I went ahead and put new holes here so we can plug weld it. And then we established this is how the holes were on this one originally. I had 5 holes like in a dice, 5 dot dice type situation there. And there's one here in this little flat. And then to do this bottom one right here that kind of hangs out under the frame rail, I went ahead and drilled it here so I can weld it from the top instead of going upside down. So it's just a little convenient thing and it won't need cleaned up on the bottom side. So with that put out there, oh yeah, we need to clean this one up. It's like this one, but it's just the one we had to take off. Got the holes RJO from where we removed it, but we need to clean it up, get weld-through primer on it so we can put that on, but that'll go on after the frame rail.
If it's, so in other words, it's the part of the surface of the window, that could be humidity, but those are usually water droplets. And your humidifier, to answer your question, the
All right, so getting everything ready to go here. A little bit more weld through primer applied, some spots. But I have this piece of angle right here, and I have it clamped to the existing frame rail on the car. And before I put it on, I had to make sure there was no leftover undercoating on the other side of the frame rail, and there was some, so I was able to scrape that off to make it clean so it doesn't throw it off. But basically what it's doing is just creating a channel for the new one to set in so that it's not wonky or anything like that. So it should set in there and fit up really nice with everything. And of course you have this part here which really is not moving side to side. It might move up and down, but that's what this is for. So this will allow it to set right up against that flush, against this. It's going to need a little bit of help to get it to fit down in here right. So a little bit of massaging of it, and I think it'll work out pretty good. Now we're going to discuss how I'm going to make this work. You see a series of various clamps holding some things together. We have our angle in here still. We have a kind of a step or a riser for this clamp because the tang of it can't go all the way down in there where it needs to be, so I put that in there as a kind of a spacer to help compress the frame rail piece to the angle here so that it's consistent from here to back to where this one is. That's holding it to the frame rail there, okay? If you come over here, you'll notice that this is definitely off, but that's okay at the moment because I'm not really concentrated on this side, okay? I am worried about this side over here, okay? So I have this clamp holding the two pieces flush together. There's a little bit of a gap in there, which is what we want. And then I have this piece, for this clamp, holding the piece directly against the angle because it was gapped out without it. So what I can do is start putting some tack welds on this portion of the frame rail and wherever I can put the nozzle in, even down to the very bottom corner. I don't want to go anywhere across there because it's uneven. It starts to spread apart there. I can even come over here and put some here. It's very flush right there. Feels pretty good. So I want to establish a few tacks here, and then you can reevaluate what you got. Obviously, this is going to need to come down. That's going to need to come down, but that's a good thing about once you get some anchor up here, it's going to start allowing you to push things around, and it's going to be anchored in there good, and you can start getting it to fall the way it needs to. Because right now, see, it's obviously sprung up compared to what it is, or it should be. Alright, I'm going to take a moment here and kind of review how we just started this, okay? So you saw the welds happen here. I still have this piece braced in there and it's still flush, setting against the angle right now. So we're good there. You saw me transfer all my clamps over to this side and kind of make a little bit of massaging of this side right here with that old screwdriver, okay, to kind of bring it down so that it would be flush with the old piece. And we're good there. And if you remember how bad this piece looked, as far as it's just being really wonky looking, this is how you can correct that. If you're in the ballpark, you start it on one side, you massage it around, and you can get it just where you need to be. As long as your measurements off of this one was good to begin with, you can make it work. It's just your piece is, you don't have the brake, like, you know, I don't have a brake, so we're using a vise, we're using hammers, everything gets all out of flex. But once you get it back in tune here, we're good. So I went ahead and did a quick measurement off this floor. I didn't go on that side of that crack there. I stayed on this side because it's going to be consistent with this side over here. But I went to the floor up to the bottom of this. I had 37 and 7/8, and I had the exact same thing to the bottom of that one. So I know I'm where I need to be. I can just bring this portion up and we can start putting some welds on that. I do need to drill a hole there. That's one I missed. So I need to drill a hole right here so we can have a plug weld for this and see how the gap is there. We need to bring that all together, clamp it really, really tight. Clamp it really tight there. And then we know this piece here needs to remain nice and flat. You don't want it bending down or anything. Well, it's sticking straight out, that's good, and then it should firm up right against there. So that's your baseline for that one. It's best if you can get a clamp all the way around the inside, kind of like I had earlier, and press that up against it first, and then you can work everything off of that, okay?
But I don't see this as a label. I see each case is its own individual case, and we're going to address that case on its own, go wherever the evidence takes us.
The accusations against Pastor are similar to Sittenfeld, except Pastor is facing a 10-count indictment accusing him of taking $55,000 in bribes in exchange for votes and influential development deals. I'm Sean. WLW.
All right, forget about it.
Okay, so the bulk of this is done. We got the brace in. And we're gonna let this marinate for a while, then we'll dress everything out, clean it up, especially around the frame rail area where we merged them together. And then this piece that ultimately needs replaced, because it's still red, right? The red is out, needs to go. It will be done the same time we do this one over here, because it's basically two identical pieces, but they flat in different directions. So, we're gonna go ahead and work on this side. It's not as intricate, not as involved, which is good. We got the worst part out of the way. But what this one will be is basically between these two green take marks. I'm gonna cut it just above where it kicks under, because the bottom side of this is very good shape. There's no pitting under there, and there's no pitting on the inside of it, so there's no thin spots. Now the reason I did come back to here was because the pitting is pretty severe. Here, and here. So let's just replace that. I mean, we can take one nice piece. We'll have to drill a hole like we did on this side, and then remount our brace for whatever that is there. And I'm going to cut it just in front of this so we don't have to recreate these holes, because it's not bad there. It's just really just isolated this section. This is ate out on the inside. It's swelling up, it's pushing it out. And so that's the primary area, and this is just kind of collateral damage. Well, it's in, welded all the way around. We got the bracing in. It's all good to go. Just got to dress it out. Got our weld through primer behind there like we need to do every time we do any kind of a lap weld. And guess what? We're gonna do this one next, as well as that one. And then I'll pretty much just leave it with the rear of the wheel wells. Pretty much it's a, just got a fold here and a fold along the top. Just the template that we made, it works on both sides. The holes are drilled, weld through primer applied, and it's pretty flush with where it meets right here, right on the very apex of that turn. And we'll show you putting the other one on, clamping it on, but this one's ready to zap. And we'll just go over there and do that one. Alright, so we're all welded up. Really, I just got to go through and buzz everything down, smooth it out, make it look good. You know, like these little edges and the corners where everything's all welded up and gnarly looking. And so I guess in this episode we will not go ahead and hit the back sections of the wheel wells. I'm going to reserve that for the next episode where we fix that and then we start prepping the trunk pan and the drop-offs. So stay tuned for that. Out.
Well, been making dreams come true. Making dreams come true.